Good afternoon and welcome to day 10 of managerial accounting. I think I finally have it figured out how to get it so that I can start with a calendar kind of listing of what's coming up. And I hope that I can keep this going. I was having an issue trying to figure out how to dismiss those other assignments in Brightspace. I have it figured out, I believe. And as we get started then, so we finished chapter 18 on Tuesday, so the chapter 18 problem should be submitted today, if you have not already done so. We're going to be starting chapter 19 today, so the pre-quiz should also be submitted today. As always, you just need to get a 60% or higher to get full credit for that quiz. So I've been having conversation with some people who want to keep working on it and keep fixing or changing their answers until they get a 100%. And I'm telling you, you're welcome to do that if it helps you learn. But if you're just doing it to get to the 100%, I would encourage you to consider whether that's a wise use of your time, because once you go higher than 60%, you get full credit for that quiz. So it's up to you, obviously, but I don't like to think of people spending time on something that's just an exercise that's not actually helping you learn the material at all. So you have my permission to stop anytime you get above 60%. We have the exam 1 practice exercises available, and just a reminder, in Cengage you need to switch away from the default, which is assignments I can take now. You need to switch to the assignments I can practice now, or to all assignments for that to show up. Or you can just use the link directly here in Brightspace. It will take you directly to them. But if you're in Cengage already and looking at your assignment list, they don't show up on the assignments you can take because they're not graded. We did have a review session yesterday morning. I did record that, and the recording is now available in Brightspace. If you go into the reference materials area and just scroll down through the chapters, and it's positioned right on the top level between the chapter 18 and 19 folders. So it's right there for you to use it or watch it if you find that useful. What you may see though is, just as a warning, those practice exercises are generated algorithmically. So it's possible that the numbers in your set may be different than the numbers that I used in that practice review session yesterday. So I explain and walk you through how to do all the calculations, but if you were trying it on your own, you would need to use your own numbers from your exercise if they're different. We talked about exam 1 on Tuesday, so you can take that at any time once you finish the assignments through chapter 18. Please do not try the exam if you haven't done those assignments yet. That's a recipe for failure. Make sure that you've completed the assignments through chapter 18. The exam covers chapters 15 through 18. There is a time limit on the exam, as you know, 3 hours. Once you start, you can't pause that 3-hour window. It's going to just keep running even if you leave the exam. If you run into any technical issues, make sure you contact me right away. Do not wait until class on Tuesday to tell me, oh, by the way, my internet kicked me out when I was trying to take the exam on whatever day. You need to reach out to me right away and let me know that there was an issue. Frequently, if there is an issue, I can fix it for you right away. If the issue is your internet access, I can't help with that, but at least I'm aware, and we can come up with a game plan to allow you to finish the exam and still have the same 3 hours that you might want. The vast majority of people will take far less than 3 hours. The average time people spend on the exam is about 1.5 hours. But please make sure you have enough time set aside so that you can focus and concentrate on the exam and not run out of time. The other reminder is, before you take the exam, you do want to open your ebook. So you need to open the book before you start the exam. it may block you from opening it once you start the exam. As long as you open it first, you're fine. Any questions about any of that? Everybody's good? Okay. Just going to pause the recording for a moment. So we're going to be starting today with chapter 19, which, as you can see from the title, is support department and joint cost allocation. So the last chapter, the last part of chapter 18, we were looking at using activity-based costing to assign overhead, and that overhead is specifically manufacturing overhead that becomes part of the cost of the product. So those are costs that we would not have if we weren't making the product. But there are other costs that are administrative in nature that are not manufacturing, and we may want to allocate those costs to the specific production departments as well. And so those could include things like the maintenance of the production facility, of the manufacturing facility, the quality assurance department, the cafeteria, or any other. All right. Any other costs that are helping to run the business and may need to be allocated. It may be that some of, like, let's say the cafeteria. So if your business has a cafeteria, that cafeteria probably provides support, if you will, to production and non-production departments. And so the cost of the cafeteria to provide food to the production workers can be seen as part of the cost of the product, where the cafeteria providing food to the accounting department would not be part of the cost of the product. And so what we're going to be doing today in the first half, and it's a little bit more than half of the content for this chapter, is that support department allocation. And then on Tuesday, when we finish up the chapter, we'll be looking at the joint cost allocation piece, which is what happens when costs are shared within production. How do we allocate them to the proper product? And you'll see more about what I mean about that on Tuesday. So our goal for today is to do the learning objective 3, basically. So the first chapters that we are going to, the first 6 exercises from this chapter are really for learning objective 3. We already have covered objective 2 in the previous chapter. We spent the entire chapter talking about, well, not quite the entire chapter, talking about single plant-wide rate, multiple department rates, and activity-based costing. So our focus for today is on learning objective 3 here, allocating support department costs using 3 different methods: direct, sequential, and reciprocal services. I'm going to tell you right now that the reciprocal services method becomes more of an algebra or geometry, and probably algebra kind of problem, more so than an accounting problem. And because it is somewhat complicated mathematically, more so than what we normally do in class, we are going to do 2 examples in class, and you'll see that it is, if you like math, you'll be fine with that. But can almost be certain that there will be people who are like, I don't understand how to set up, because you set up a system of equations and solve, and for some people that's challenging. And so I'm just going to tell you right now, I know it's challenging and it's not on the exam. So we are going to do it, but you won't have to do it on the exam. But there is an extra credit problem that goes along with the exam. It's not on the exam itself, it's a separate question, separate problem that is extra credit, and it is the reciprocal services method. Yes. No, sorry. I should have said that at the beginning of class. Chapter 19, what we're covering today, is not on this weekend's exam at all. So this weekend is 15 through 18. What we're starting today is on exam number 2, which covers chapters 19, 20, and 21. So we have 4 exams, we have 14 chapters. So the exams cover 4, 3, 4, 3 chapters. So our next exam covers only 3 chapters. It is worth the same amount towards your final grade. So I think the exams are worth 50% towards your final grade. And so each exam is worth 12.5% of your final grade. So I think that gives you a little bit of a, the weight per chapter on the 4 chapter exams is a little less than the 3 chapter exams. So I know that it might be a little bit more challenging because it has more material, but it carries the same weight as the exams with fewer chapters. So reciprocal services, bit more challenging, not on the exam, but the reason we spend time on it is because there is an extra credit. And I just want you to see how it works. See how that, because it is, the results of the reciprocal services method can be more accurate than the other 2. Okay, so just like I've been saying about the other techniques we've used, you want to go with the simplest technique, the one that's the least time consuming, therefore the least costly, but that still allows you to recognize and understand how or where your costs are coming from. So reciprocal services can give us a better picture of our true or actual costs for each part of the production process. And that's why we cover it, even though it's a little bit more complicated. I probably should even mention this, but I also, the textbook just went to a new edition. So we're using in this class the older edition, but the financial accounting class this semester is using the newer edition. It just came out in late spring. And I did notice looking ahead that they have totally changed the coverage of reciprocal services. So I think the textbook author also recognized, hey, this is kind of a complicated topic for this class. So I don't know, I guess I felt justified that I have never had it on the exam. It's always been extra credit because I said it's way more complicated than the other 2 methods. But again, the reason we have it is because sometimes it gives us a lot better result, a lot more valid results. So with that being said, I am going to jump right into the exercises and we'll start with the direct method. So the first 6 exercises for this chapter, there are 2 each of direct, sequential, and reciprocal. The sequential method we'll get to in just a minute. You'll also hear me refer to that as the step down method because you may hear that term used in other contexts. So in this exercise, in our exercise number 1, we're looking at the direct method. This is definitely the easiest, the most straightforward. That's why it's called the direct method. We take the cost for the support department and we allocate it directly to each production department. So we don't allocate the support department to any other support departments. So going back to my example of the cafeteria, if the cafeteria provides, if this support department was the cafeteria, the accounting department might also use the cafeteria, but we do not allocate any cost from the one support department, cafeteria, to another support department. It all goes directly to the production departments and becomes part of the cost of the product in this case. So as we've been talking about since chapter 16, whenever we're allocating costs, and in chapter 16, we started with manufacturing overhead costs that clearly were part of the cost of the product. Things like utilities and taxes and insurance and supervision and things like that. So just like since chapter 16, if we're going to allocate cost, we need to decide what driver, what base we're going to use to allocate them. And in this case, let's see, it says Yodown Inc. produces yogurt. Information related to the company's yogurt production follows. And I don't know if these are pounds of product or if they are number of employees or if it is square footage. It actually does not tell us what these numbers represent. Obviously, if this was our company, we would know 1,400 what? I think they deliberately leave it open-ended so that we could imagine this in a number of different circumstances. So if this was utilities for heating or electricity, we might allocate it by square footage. If this was cafeteria, we might allocate by number of employees. If this was human resources, again, we might use number of employees. If this is quality assurance or inspection, we might allocate by the number of pounds of product that are being produced, because the more we're producing, the more inspection or quality assurance is required. So even though it does not tell us here what those numbers actually represent, 1,400, 100, and 500, what? We can imagine what some appropriate cost drivers might be or allocation bases might be. We spent time, we did a whole exercise in chapter 18 thinking about what's an appropriate allocation base for a variety of different activities. Support Department 1's costs total $142,000, and we're asked to use the direct method of Support Department cost allocation to determine the costs from Support Department 1 that should be allocated to each production department. So let me get my writing tool up here. So again, just like we did starting in chapter 16, the first step would be to calculate the expected cost per unit. And we need to know how many units there are, whether it's pounds or people or square feet or whatever this allocation base is. We need to know how many there are in total. So 1,400 plus 100 plus 500 is 2,000. And we're going to divide the total cost of 142,000 by the 2,000 units of whatever that allocation base is. And that gives me a cost of $71 per unit, per person, per square foot, whatever it might be. And so now for Production Department 1, let's just pretend that this is the cafeteria and these are the number of workers, just so I can stop being vague. So Production Department 1 has 1,400 workers, and we've calculated the cost per worker at $71 for the cafeteria. So $71 per person times 1,400 people. The total allocated cost to Production Department 1 would be $99,400. You can do the same thing for Production Department 2, 100 workers at $71 each. And then finally for Production Department 3. And what I would encourage you to do is once you do that, simply add those three together to make sure that we have completely and fully allocated the $142,000, that we didn't over or under allocate those costs. And when I add those together, it does indeed equal $142,000. Chapter 19 exercises. Okay, so that's the direct method, very straightforward. We could do this for any number of support departments. We could have 10 support departments and each one of them is independent. So we allocate those costs totally independently. This is Support Department 1, and we allocated to each of the production departments. Support department 2 would be a whole separate and independent calculation, totally unaffected by what we did here. And we might use the same allocation base. So if this, I was using cafeteria and number of people. If this was human resources, we might also use number of people for the allocation, or it could be totally different. Like I said, it could be maintenance and we allocate by square footage, or custodial services might be allocated by square footage. Heating costs might be allocated by square footage. Okay, so any questions about this exercise? To get my green check marks in there. Okay, let's jump ahead to exercise 4 then. And exercise 4 is our second example of the direct method. And in this exercise, you know, it's almost like I've done this exercise before, because look what they're using: janitorial and square footage, cafeteria and number of employees. So you've already heard me use those examples. In this exercise, it says Becker Tabletops has 2 support departments and 2 production departments. Our job then is going to be to allocate each of the support departments to each of the production departments. The production departments are cutting and assembly. So those are the departments that are actually working on making the product, which is apparently tabletops. So we're going to use square footage for the janitorial department. Let's do that one together. And then I'll ask you to do the cafeteria part on your own. So if we're using janitorial, if we're allocating the janitorial department and we're allocating it based on square footage. Now remember, the direct method means we do not allocate support department cost to other support departments. Do we think that the cafeteria doesn't use janitorial services? Wait, I hope they do. I hope that they clean the cafeteria. Do we think that the janitorial department doesn't ever eat in the cafeteria? They probably do. But when we use the direct method, we ignore that. We ignore the fact that support departments may also support other support departments. And we're only focused on how the support departments support the production departments. So when we're looking at the allocating the janitorial department and we're allocating it based on square footage, we're only looking at the square footage for the production departments. And I'm emphasizing this because when we get to the reciprocal or step down approach next, you'll notice we do start to take into account those support departments. But as I said, the direct method is the easiest, simplest, most straightforward, the least work involved. And from where I put that green box, you can see that the 2 production departments encompass 5,000 square feet of space. And so we want to take the cost of the janitorial department, whoops, which is right here. So the cost of the janitorial department is $310,000, and we are going to allocate that to the 5,000 square feet of production departments. $310,000 divided by 5,000 square feet. That's my abbreviation, I guess, for square feet. I'm just going to put feet so we don't confuse people. So $310,000 divided by 5,000 square feet is $62 per square foot. Oops, my fingers on the wrong keys. There we go. So the janitorial department is the cost is $62 per square foot of production. So the cutting department has 1,000 square feet. At $62 each, that would be $62,000 worth of cost from the janitorial department being allocated to cutting. And the assembly department has 4,000 square feet at $62, or $248,000 allocated. Again, I would encourage you to add across and just make sure that you have fully allocated the cost of the janitorial department, $310,000. That matches, we have fully allocated that cost. And so if I was going to draw arrows, this 310,000 we allocated from the support department directly to the production departments. We did not allocate any cost from janitorial to the cafeteria. And we're also not going to allocate any cost from the cafeteria to the janitorial. That's what direct means. It goes directly to the production departments. Everybody good so far? Anyone with questions? Okay, well, please go ahead and try the cafeteria department on your own. I'm going to pause the recording for a moment, so let you do that. Okay, so remember that the cafeteria department was being allocated based on the number of employees, and we're only using the employees for the production departments. So that's 30 plus 10, a total of 40 employees. Again, we recognize that the janitorial staff might use the cafeteria. What I haven't pointed out is it's also possible the cafeteria uses the cafeteria and that the janitorial department cleans its own department. But we've totally disregarded that for the purpose of the direct method. We take the support departments and allocate them directly to the production departments. We don't allocate to any other support departments along the way. So 40 employees, $169,000 total cost for the cafeteria. That's $4,225 per employee, times 30 for the cutting department, times 10 for the assembly department. And then I would recommend that you add across just to make sure that that you have fully allocated those costs from the production, or sorry, from the support departments to the production departments. So that's the direct method, definitely the easiest, most straightforward. We allocate support department costs directly to the production departments. We don't allocate to any other support departments. And we're going to go back to exercise 2 for the sequential method. So hopefully everybody knows what sequential means. It means it happens in sequence or in steps in order. I also refer to this as the step down method or the step down approach to allocating support department costs. So in this exercise number 2, it says Snowy River Stallion Incorporated produces horse and rancher equipment. Cost from support department 1, you're being vague again. You can think of it as whatever you want. Costs from support department 1 are allocated based on the number of employees. Costs from support department 2 are allocated based on asset value. Relevant department information is provided in the following table. So we have 2 support departments, 2 production departments. We are given across the bottom row of the table the total cost for that department, and then we are given the information we need about the allocation base, the number of employees, and the asset value. One important piece of information in addition to what's in that table is if we are going to do this in sequence, sequential, or in a step down fashion, we have to know which one goes first. So there is no magic answer to whether we allocate support department 1 or support department 2 first. There's no wrong answer. There might be an answer that's more valid or more correct, but it's completely up to the company how they did, or the management or the accounting staff or whatever, to decide how to allocate it or in which order. So we could start with support department 1, or we could start with support department 2. What we are, for the purposes of class, you will be told which one goes first. Okay, you'll be told which one goes first. It might be in the real world that you decide to allocate the most expensive department first. It might be that you decide to allocate the department that provides the most service to other support departments. And there's a number of ways that you can decide to do that. But for this exercise, we're actually only doing the first step, which is allocating support department 1 to the other departments. So what makes this different, the process of deciding your cost per unit is really going to be the same process as what we just used in the direct method. However, what makes the sequential method different is we do allocate support department costs to other support departments. So when we allocate support department 1, we're going to allocate to every other department. And that's what you see down here where our boxes are to put in our answers. We are going to allocate support department 1 to all 3 of the remaining departments. And then even though the exercise does not ask us to do so, we are going to do step 2 because that is a necessary part of this process, even though it's not part of this exercise. So let's start with the support department 1, and it tells us that we're allocating based on number of employees. So I'm going to, again, put a box around those number of employees. So these numbers are the numbers we're going to use to determine how to allocate those costs. And the total cost for the department is $20,000. So we're going to allocate that $20,000 based on number of employees for those 3 other departments. Again, including 1 support department. So that's a total of 50 employees. We're going to allocate. This is department 1. Support 1, I'll just call it support 1. And the total cost is $20,000. And we're allocating that based on 50 employees. We do not include the number. We do not include the number of employees in support department 1 because we're not allocating to support department 1. And so what I found is a cost of $400 per employee. Everyone agree with that? Okay. So now we can go ahead and allocate based on the number of employees in that green box. Support department 2 has 7 employees. So 7 times 400, 2,800. Support department, production department 1 has 25 employees. At $400 each, that would be $10,000. And finally, production department 2, 18 employees at $400 each, or $7,200. And I, again, would encourage you to check your work, just add across and make sure you have fully allocated the $20,000 cost for that department. And we did, right? So this 20,000 went to support department 2 and production department 1 and 2. I now want to do the next step, even though it's not actually required for this exercise, because we are in no way done with this allocation. We have not yet allocated support department 2. And so this support department cost right here, $15,500 for support department 2, needs to be allocated to the remaining departments. So that's why it's called step down. We're only going to, now for support department 2, I'm just going to put some boxes here. For support department 2, pretend those line up, pretend those are straight across. So for support department 2, we need to take that 15,500 and allocate it to the 2 remaining departments. And we are going to use for support department 2 is based on asset value. So we're going to be using just the asset values for production departments 1 and 2, the remaining departments.
How come we don't use the support asset value, like support department 1's asset value?
Because we're so the step down method has you gradually just reduce the number of departments. So if you had 4 support departments, the first one you would allocate to the other 3 support departments plus the production departments. Then you'd go down to the next line and allocate that second support department to the remaining 2 support departments plus production.
Okay.
So each line, each allocation, you're eliminating one of the support departments.
Okay.
It's a little bit harder to see in this exercise
Yeah,
because there are
I see.
only 2 support departments, but. And I don't know that this is where you were going, but it does somewhat highlight the issue with this sequential and the direct approach, the direct method that we did in the first 2 exercises, that the support departments do support each other. So support department 1 here, we recognize that it supports support department 2. We allocated some cost to that. But we ignored the fact that support department 2 might also provide service to support department 1. We didn't recognize that. We didn't do that in the direct method either. And that is what makes this reciprocal method different, because we allocate every support department to every other support department along with the production departments. But it's just more complicated that way. And you'll see that when we get to our 2 exercises about the reciprocal method. So asset value for production department 1 and 2, the total is $11,330. So if I divide that into the department cost of $15,500, how can it be not a nice round number? Did I just 30, 1,500, 1,730. Wow. Oh, what? Hang on. I know what I didn't do. I knew I was doing something wrong. Our support department 2 now includes, and I think before I speak, our support department 2 now includes the $2,800 that we allocated from support department 1. Knew I wasn't thinking of something. So we have the original 15,500, but we also said support department 1 provides service to support department 2, and that service is worth $2,800. So now we have $18,300 worth of total cost. Divide that by the $11,330 of asset value. And we get $1.40. I'm going to use a, whoops, where's my, where am I going to put this? I'm going to put it down here at the bottom, just so that it's not running into those arrows. So it's support department 2. So the total cost for the department is the 15,500 plus the 2,800 we allocated from 1. So there's our total cost. And then we have to divide by the asset value. There we go. And rounding off, I got $1.61 and 61.5 cents per unit, per dollar of asset value, per dollar asset value. Don't know how else to write that. Okay. Everyone with me so far? Okay. So the support department 2 cost now includes the original cost, the direct cost, plus what was allocated from support department 1. We then use the asset value of the remaining departments, which happen to be the 2 production departments, and that gives us a $1.61.5 rounding off. And now we can allocate $1.61.5 times the asset value from production department 1, which is 62.30, gives us, just going to round off to the closest dollar here, $10,061. And then for production department 2, $1.61.5 times $5,100 in asset value would be $8,236. Probably have a rounding issue in there. So adding across, we should be able to check to make sure that that is close to the total of $18,300. It's close. It's off a little bit because I rounded that per unit answer. And so now we can calculate the total cost of production department 1. And I'm going to show you how to do that. Total allocated cost. And this would usually be called something like the fully allocated or something like that, the total fully allocated cost, which is going to include for production department 1, its direct cost, which was $99,000 given in the table. So right here, $99,000 is the direct cost for production department 1, but we now have $10,000 worth of cost that came from support department 1 and another $10,061 rounded. So I'm just adding down, starting with this direct cost, adding the 2 allocated costs, and I'm going to do the same thing for production department 2. The direct cost was $79,000 plus the $7,200 that was allocated from support department 1 plus the $82.36 from support department 2, $94,436. And the last thing I want to show you to finish up this exercise is what we should have at the end. What we are going for is that when we are done, we have these 4 costs are fully borne, fully allocated to the production departments. So what we are trying to do is take the $20,000 from support department 1, the $15,500 from support department 2, and divide them up equitably or fairly between production department 1 and 2. And so I'm just going to check that. If I add those four together, 20,000 plus 15,500 plus 99,000 plus 79,000, that total is 213,500. Okay. Total cost, departmental cost, adding across 213,500. Whoops, wrong key. 500. And so if I add these two together down here, it should come out to 213,500. And we know we're going to be off just a little bit because of my rounding issue. So it came out to 213,497. So it's off $3 just because of rounding. So again, the end result of all three of these methods, the end result needs to be that all of the cost is now on the production departments only, that we have essentially zeroed out, fully allocated the support departments. Questions? So let me say it one more time, and then we can go to exercise 5 and try this again. And have you work on that one a little bit more independently. The direct method, you take the support departments and allocate only to production departments. The step down or sequential method, you allocate in order. Each step in the process or each step in the sequence allocates one more support department to whatever's left, to all the remaining departments. And by the time you finish the final step, you've allocated all of the support departments to the production departments. The end result always has to be that the support department cost has been fully allocated and all of that cost has been shifted to the production departments. Before I clear the drawings, does anyone want to ask a question about this? So let's move ahead then to exercise 5. And you'll notice that this sounds kind of familiar because it's the same information that was given in exercise 4. In exercise 4, we use the direct approach, the direct method. In exercise 5, we are going to use the sequential method. So same data that were provided in the previous exercise. And we're going to use the sequential method, and it tells us to allocate the support department with the highest department cost first. So I said we would need to be told, because there is no wrong answer, which one has the highest department cost? The janitorial department. So we're going to allocate janitorial first, but we could just have easily decided that we were going to allocate the cafeteria first. But we didn't. You would for class purposes, we will need to be told which one goes first. And as I said, I want you to work a little bit more independently on this one. You're welcome to work with someone else in the classroom. If there are people sitting near you, that's fine. But I'm going to pause the recording and ask you to try this on your own. I'm going to be putting mine on the screen. I'll restart the recording once we are through the exercise and then answer any questions that you might have. So if we allocate janitorial first, it's going to go to the other 3 departments. And then we'll have just cafeteria, cutting, and assembly left, and we'll allocate cafeteria to the remaining 2 departments. Restart the recording once you've finished the exercise. Okay, so looking at exercise 5, this is using the step down or sequential method, and we were told to allocate the highest department cost first, so that would be the janitorial department. We allocate that based on square footage. So I looked just at the square footage for the other three departments. 5 + 1 + 4 is 10,000. Took the total cost of 310,000 divided by 10,000 square feet and got $31 per square foot. I allocated that to the cafeteria, the cutting department, and the assembly department based on their individual square footage. So 5,000 times 31 is 155 and so on. Now we've eliminated the janitorial department. It has completely been allocated, all $310,000 to the other three remaining departments. And we can move on to the cafeteria. The cafeteria then is going to be allocated just to cutting and assembly based on number of employees. So 30 + 10 is a total of 40 employees for those two departments. Our cost to be allocated is the direct cost of the cafeteria, 169,000 plus the 155,000 that was allocated from janitorial. So that ends up being $8,100 per employee, times the 30 employees for cutting is 243, times the 10 employees for assembly is 81,000. I noted those on the answers down here. And then I added one more line for fully allocated total cost for those production departments, starting with their departmental cost plus the allocated cost from each of the two support departments. I then did a check to make sure I had accounted for everything. I added together the 4 department costs that are given here in this line and made sure that the fully allocated cost for the production departments was equal to that, and it is. Any questions? Okay. Go ahead and my green check marks. And we are going to move on then to move backward, I guess, to exercise 3. There it is. Actually, while we're here, let me just show you the difference. If you compare what we have here in exercise 4, where we use the direct method, to our answers in exercise 5, and I don't have the totals there, but as I've already said, you can see that the sequential method is a little more complicated. It took an extra step, basically. And so we would only want to do that if the results we got from using the sequential method here in exercise 5 were materially different than what we got here in exercise 4. If they're pretty much the same, we don't need to go through the extra hassle, the extra work, the extra time, and therefore cost associated with using the sequential method. So we would just go with the direct method if the answer is basically the same, if it wouldn't lead to us making a different decision about our company. We're going to go back to exercise 3. I never check my work there. So let's go back to exercise 3, and we're going to look at the reciprocal services method. So as I said when we started class, this is not on your exam, but there is an extra credit, so it is in your best interest to work on these and try to do this on your own. Try to be able to do this on your own. And let's look at the reciprocal services method. The idea in the reciprocal services method is we allocate each department, each support department, to every other department. So in the direct method, we never allocated support to support. In reciprocal service, in the sequential method or the step down method, we allocated some support departments to some other support departments, but we didn't allocate back. So thinking about our last example, we had janitorial and cafeteria. We allocated janitorial to cafeteria, but not cafeteria to janitorial. And so the reciprocal services method gives us a way of allocating all the support departments to all of the other support departments. But in order to do that, we end up producing or writing 2 formulas two equations, and each of the equations is going to have two variables. So we have to substitute one equation into the other so that we have just one variable. As I said, it really is a math problem, much more so than an accounting issue. But it is an important technique if it gives us a result that is a better understanding of our total costs, of our true costs. As I've said in earlier chapters and earlier classes, all of this is internal. In total, our costs are going to be exactly the same, regardless of which of these methods we choose to use. So there isn't one that's right or wrong, or any one of them is eligible to be used. So we'd want to use the one that was the simplest to use while giving us the best possible cost understanding of our costs. And that's going to help us to run our business, to make decisions about running our business. Exercise 3 says, Blue Africa Incorporated produces laptops and desktop computers. The company's production activities mainly occur in what the company calls its laser and forming departments. The cafeteria and security departments support the company's production activities and allocate costs based on the number of employees and square feet respectively. The total cost of the security department is $273,000. The total cost of the cafeteria department is $180,000. The number of employees and the square footage in each department are as follows, and then we have our table. Using reciprocal services method of support department cost allocation, determine the total cost from the security department that should be allocated to the cafeteria department and to each of the production departments. Okay, so as I said, we're going to start out with setting up two equations. And so I need to give myself a little bit more white space here so I can try to write this out on the screen. So I'm going to put kind of my key up here. So S is going to be the security department, and C is going to represent the cost of the cafeteria department. The security department is allocated based on the number of, the cafeteria is based on the number of employees, and the security department is based on square footage. So we're not going to allocate the cost of the security department to itself. We're going to be allocating it to the other three categories, or the other three departments. So I just want to do some quick math here. So total square footage that does not include the security department. And that is 8,000 square feet. And the total employees, total employees for the cafeteria does not include the cafeteria. So we're allocating to, let me put 10 first. We're allocating and that is 100. So under the reciprocal services method, we allocate each support department to each other support department. So in this case, we're allocating security to cafeteria, but we're also allocating cafeteria costs to the security department. So I'm going to start writing my system of equations now that we have those basic numbers. So we want to know, what's the cost of the security department? Well, the security department direct cost is $273,000. Stop me if you're not sure where I'm getting a number or what I'm saying. The security department direct costs are $273,000, but the security department is also receiving services from the cafeteria department. And the security department has 10 of the 100 employees that are serviced by the cafeteria department. Again, we're not counting the employees that work for the cafeteria department, even though they might actually eat in the cafeteria. So for the security department, we want 10 of the 100, or 1/10 of the cost of the cafeteria. The security department represents 10 of the 100 employees that use the cafeteria, but don't work for the cafeteria. We want 1/10 of the cost of the cafeteria to be allocated to the security department. That's our first formula, our first equation. Now we're going to write our second equation, which is the equation for the cafeteria costs. The cafeteria, whoops, is $180,000. Those are the direct costs. But the cafeteria is also protected by the security department. They also receive services from the cafeteria. From the security department. The cafeteria has 2,400 square feet, and the security department is responsible for 8,000 square feet. So 2,400 of those are the cafeteria. So we're going to allocate to the cafeteria 2,400 out of the 80,000 or 8,000, excuse me, times the cost for the cafeteria. But what are we missing here? The total cost for the security department isn't just $180,000, right? We said the cafeteria costs $180,000 plus part of the cost of the security department. And by the same token, the cafeteria doesn't just cost $180,000. It costs $180,000 plus a part of the security department. So I've got a bit of an error here in my formulas. It's not correct to say that the cost of the cafeteria is only $180,000. We actually don't know yet what the cost of the cafeteria is. So I'm going to plug in there C. That's our unknown, the total cost of the cafeteria. And I'm going to do the same thing. Whoops. There we go. I'm going to do the same thing here. The security department doesn't actually only cost $273,000. It costs $273,000 plus some part of the cafeteria's cost, 10% of the cafeteria's cost. And so rather than putting just the direct cost, I really need to have an S there. Does that make sense? Makes it more complicated, right? Because now we have a system of equations. We have two equations, each with two variables, each with the same two variables. But can we solve an equation that has two variables in it? No, we can't solve an equation that has two variables in it. So we could do this one of two ways. We could take this, we know that this is C, or this is equal to C, so we could take that and plug it in for C. Or we could take the S equals and plug that into the second equation for S. I'm going, because they ask us for the security department cost allocation. I'm going to plug the C, what I put in the green box, I'm going to plug it in to the first equation. Again, we could do it either way. But because of what they've asked for here, it makes sense to solve for the security, the fully allocated cost for the security department first. So I'm just took the 10 over 100 and just put it into a decimal form. Now I'm going to plug in, make sure you put your grouping symbols there. I'm going to simplify that 2,400 divided by 8,000. Change that into a decimal also, just because I prefer to work with the decimals. If you prefer to work with the fractions, by all means, please feel free to work with the fractions. And so I just took what I have in the green box, 180,000 plus 2,400 out of 8,000, which is 30% or 0.3 times S. And now I'm going to distribute the 10%. We're always, of course, going to follow the rules of mathematics, PEMDAS, the order of operations. So we would do the parentheses first, but those are not like terms, so I can't combine those. So I'm going to distribute the 10% inside the parentheses to get rid of those parentheses. 10% of 180 is 18,000, and 10% times 30% or 0.1 times 0.3, 0.3 S. Continuing to combine like terms, I'm going to subtract 0.3 S from each side. And combine the constants, 273,000 plus 18,000 is 291,000. Last step to get S by itself is to divide each side by 0.97. Whoops. And I find that S is 300,000. So that 300,000 includes the 273,000 direct cost plus 27,000 that was allocated from the cafeteria. For what they have us do here for this exercise, we can find our final answers here. The security department cost allocation, we need to take that 300,000 and allocate it to the 3 other departments based on security department uses square footage. So the cafeteria department gets 2,400 out of 8,000 total square feet. We already know that's 0.3 or 30%. So 0.3 times 300,000, 90,000, whoops. That $90,000 would be allocated to the cafeteria. The laser department is 4,000 out of the total 8,000, or half of the total cost of the security department is for the laser department. And then 1,600 divided by the 8,000 total square footage, or the last 20%. Yep.
How did you, so the 0.97 S,
Yep.
How did you get the rest of it? So like the 300,000?
Yep. So let me start back here from this step. So I subtracted 0.3 S, 0.03 S from each side.
Yeah.
So I had 0.97 S over here. I added these two together. 273 plus 18 is 291.
Yeah.
And then I divided each side by the 0.97. So 291,000 divided by 0.97 is 300,000.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
yeah. Thank you.
That's the end of this exercise. And we are almost out of time. So let me just wrap up by saying the final step, which is not required for this exercise, but would be required in reality, is that we find the total for the cafeteria. So the cafeteria total, because I have an extra minute or two here, the total for the cafeteria, let me just show you this. The total for the cafeteria would be the direct cost of 180,000 plus what we allocated to the cafeteria here from the security department, 90,000. So the total cost for the cafeteria would be 270,000. We could have taken the 180, taken this formula right here at the top, C equals 180 plus 30% of the 300,000, but we'd already done that part here. So I just added that. We now have 270,000 for the cafeteria, and I can allocate the cafeteria, allocate the cafeteria here based on the number of employees. I don't have a column for security, so let me just add them down here at the end, because there's not enough room to fit it in there. And so the cafeteria would be allocated to the laser department based on the 40 out of 100 employees, or 40% of the 270,000, or 108,000. It would be allocated to the forming department based on the 50 out of 100, or half of the total cost. And then be allocated to the security department based on the 10 employees, 1/10 of the total cost, or 27, whoops, don't need a dollar sign, 27,000. We already knew that 27,000 because that's the difference between the direct cost of 273 plus the, so the direct cost of 273 plus the 27,000 gives us this fully allocated cost for the security department. So if you're shaking your head right now and thinking, yeah, I maybe you're even saying, yeah, I get what you did, but I'm not sure I could do that myself. Again, that's fine. We are going to do on Tuesday, when we come back to class. We have, okay, I'm getting my morning and my afternoon class. My morning class ends at 55. I'm never going to remember what time this class ends. This class ends at 3:10. I got tons of time left. However, yeah.
So how did you get the 90,000 for the cafeteria?
How did I get the 90? Oh, right here. This 90,000 right here.
Yeah, like.
Yeah.
It's the 30%, but where did you get the 30% from?
Yeah, so the cafeteria is the security department is allocated based on square footage. So here's the square footage. The cafeteria is 2,400 out of the total 8,000. That's 30%. And so I took 30% of the 300,000 for the security department.
So I'm just getting like 33. So like if I,
You did, so you should just be doing 0.3 times the 300,000, or 2,400 divided by 8,000 times the 300,000.
oh, okay, I see. Okay. Yep. I got it now. Thank you.
Okay. So, any other questions Can't believe I can never remember what time this class is over. Last week I thought it went till 3:15. Now I thought it was over at 2:55. I don't really want to move on to the other example of this because I do want you to try it on your own. You're welcome to try it on your own now. I just want to show you one more thing related to this exercise. And then I am going to turn you loose to try it on your own. You're welcome to stay and try it now. But when we come in on Tuesday, we will do exercise 6 together. But if everyone's comfortable with it, we'll move through it pretty quickly. Let me show you one more thing here, though. This is an important part. So I'm just going to put in here, I guess, we don't know, we aren't given. If we were at this company, we would know, but we aren't given the total cost for the laser and the forming departments. So I'm just going to look at the cafeteria department, which has a total direct cost of $180, and the security department, which has a total direct cost of $273. Okay. So so when we allocated the security department to each one of the other departments, we allocated 108,000 to the laser department, 135,000 to the forming department, and 27,000 to security. We allocated out a total of $270,000. For the security department, when we allocated that, we allocated 90,000 to the cafeteria, 150,000 to the laser department, 60,000 to the forming department, and that's a total of 300,000 that we allocated from there. You can see now, if you add down the cafeteria department, we had 180,000 in direct cost. We added 90,000 from security, and then we allocated out all of that, 270,000. So the cost that's left in the cafeteria department would be 0, right? It's 0. We had 180 in direct cost. We added 90 and then allocated the 270,000 to the other 3 departments. We can do that same thing for the security department. We had 273,000 in direct cost. We added 27,000 from the cafeteria department cost allocation, and then we allocated out 300,000. That leaves in the security department $0. And that's what needs to happen. That's exactly what happened under the direct method and under the sequential method. Under all 3 methods, we end up taking whatever cost is in those support departments and moving it or allocating it, reassigning it to the production departments. So regardless of which one you're using, the end result is the same in that all the support cost ends up on the production departments. It's just 3 different ways of getting to that ending answer. We could, if we knew the direct cost of laser and forming, we could now add those and get their total fully allocated cost as we've done in the previous 2 exercises. But this exercise doesn't tell us what those costs are, the direct costs. We didn't need to know to do the allocation. And so they didn't tell us. But of course, if we worked for this company, we would know. We've now done the direct method and the sequential method twice. We've done the reciprocal services method once. And I'm going to ask you, as I said, to try exercise 6 on your own outside of class. It's not your priority for this weekend because your priority, of course, is the exam, preparing for the exam and taking the exam that does not include this chapter. So I guess if, once you take the exam, if you have additional time that you can devote to accounting, I would ask you to try exercise 6 on your own. I think you'd be better off to try it on your own first and see maybe what kind of questions you have. But when we come into class on Tuesday, we will start with exercise 6 and we will do it together. But hopefully you've had a chance to try it on your own before then, and ideally figure, gotten the correct answers, figured it out on your own. Then the bulk of our class time on Tuesday will be devoted to the joint cost allocation, which is the second portion of the chapter. What kind of questions do you have? Everybody's okay? Or you're not even sure what to ask? Exercise 6 has you fully allocate both departments. You'll notice it looks really familiar because it's exactly the same problem that we did in exercise 4 and 5, but now we're using that third method. So you're going to have to fully allocate both departments as we just did in the last exercise, even though it didn't ask us to do that. So we're going to stop here for today. Let me know if you, as I said, let me know immediately if you have any technical issues with the exam. Don't forget to open your book before you take the exam, before you start the exam.
This is it's more like a